How was it possible that a fully functional Airbus A310 went into a spin and dropped like a rock? Stay tuned to find out the shocking thing that happened when there are more than 4 people in the cockpit. The year was 1994. March 1994. The flight was scheduled to depart from Russia to Kai Tak International Airport in Hong Kong. As the flight duration was more than 13 hours, 3 pilots need to take turns to fly the aircraft. The captain was 40 years old and had 9,700 flight hours. 950 of them were on the A310. The first officer was 33 years old and had 5,900 flight hours. 440 hours were on the A310. The third pilot was a relief captain that had 9,000 flight hours. He had about 910 of them on type. The relief captain decided to bring his 2 children for this trip. Yona was 13 years old and Eldar, the older one, was 16 years old. It is important to note that the relief pilot has previously flown the Yalovlev Yak-40, Antonov An-12 and Illusion Illinois 76. And so there were a total of 63 passengers on board the plane and 9 cabin crews. At 13:39 UTC, the magnificent aircraft took off from runway 25 right in Moscow. The aircraft started climbing and was cruising normally at 34,000 feet. For the first 4 hours, it was a fairly normal flight. 30 minutes past midnight, the captain decided to rest and was replaced by the relief captain. Once the relief captain took over, one passenger who was also a pilot requested to be seated in the jump seat. That request was approved. The relief captain also then decided to call his 2 children into the cockpit. As the children was looking in the cockpit, the captain had an idea. He asked his daughter whether she would like to sit on his seat. Of course, Yona was super excited when she heard this. The captain got out of his chair to let Yona sit. But he made one crucial mistake. He did not hand over controls to the first officer. The relief captain then asked Yona to hold the control column. He then set the aircraft on heading select mode and started turning it to the left. The aircraft then started a 20-degree bank. This made Yona felt like she was in control of the plane. The captain then selected a right heading to head back on course. He then selected back the navigation mode. After 7 minutes, Yona makes way for her brother Eldar. The pilot, who was traveling as a passenger, took a picture of Eldar. The relief captain then select the heading again to the left, so that the plane will turn. However, this time Eldar put a bit of force on the control column. But this does not disrupt the aircraft flight path. The relief captain then turned the heading bug to the right to re-establish with the flight path. Eldar followed through on the control column, but this time he applied more pressure. One thing about the A310, you can partially disconnect the autopilot when extra force is applied. Because Eldar was turning right forcefully, the autopilot for the lateral channel disconnected while the vertical part is still on autopilot. There was no oral warning when this happened, and the first officer did not notice this too. The aircraft kept on turning right. The relief captain was busy talking to his daughter. When the aircraft was banking about 20 degrees, Eldar speaks up and told them that the aircraft is turning. Now everyone was looking at the navigation display and was not concentrating on the aircraft attitude. The aircraft slowly started turning 30 degrees, then 45 degrees, with the autopilot still engaged. The aircraft tried to maintain altitude and the stabilizer was deflected fully up. As the aircraft was doing a steep turn, the crew and passengers felt a G-force of 1.6 G. That is when the pilots finally saw the attitude of the plane. Before we continue, do click on the like button and subscribe if you want to see more of these videos. I appreciate you and will love you for a very, very long time. The relief captain shouted,
"Hold on. Hold the column, Holding.
Eldar, his son, actually kept holding on to the control column. The first officer understood the command and actually turned left to keep the aircraft level. But Eldar is turning right instead. Because of this, the aircraft is still turning right dangerously. The aircraft has now turned 90 degrees with the elevators fully up. The aircraft started shaking, giving an indication that it is stalling. The autopilot could not take it anymore and disconnected. The correct action was to actually push the nose down to get out of the stall before putting the wings level. As the aircraft protection system kicks in, the aircraft started putting her nose down. The aircraft pitch went from 20 degrees nose down to 50 degrees nose down. This gave an astonishing rate of descent of 39,000 feet per minute. The first officer finally regained his situational awareness and started pitching up. This induced a huge G-force on the aircraft. The relief captain is then unable to get back to his seat. The first officer then started pitching up and pulling back the thrust levers to idle. This maneuver caused the aircraft to lose speed. The speed that was at 400 knots dropped to 100 knots. The captain managed to get his son out of the seat. Once he was seated, one of the pilots kicked the rudder to the left. With low speed, the aircraft went into a spin and started diving straight down again. The aircraft managed to stabilize for a bit with a 20-degree left-hand bank. The pitch was still 20 degrees nose down. The aircraft would have stabilized if the pilots let go of the controls. But because of the nose down, the pilots started pitching up and the aircraft loses speed again. The rudder was then kicked to the left again. The aircraft then went into a spin again. And crashed into a mountain. Everyone on board perished. The time it took for the plane to go down from its cruise altitude was 2 minutes and 25 seconds.
Пошел, да? Слева идет самолет? Неверно, да? Право. Нормально, подсказывай. Сейчас вправо пойдет. Что-то я находлю. Что-то я. Сейчас поворачивает. Там поворачивает. Да. А почему он поворачивает, не знаю. Ты забьет? Вы в зону пошли ожидания. Да? Конечно. Ребята. Держи, что он держит. В обратную сторону. Обратно, влево. Обратно. Лево крути. Право, лево. Лево. Обратно. Лево. А влево крути. Право. Право. Ты не видишь, что ли? Право крути. Право крути. Право крути. Право. Да влево, земля, вот. Дар, выходи. Выползай назад. Выползай назад, Эльдар. Ты видишь здесь меня? Ну ты малый! Выходи. Выходи, Эльдар. Выходи быстрее. Выходи. 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 Выходи, говорит. Полный газ, полный газ! Полный газ! Дал газ, дал! Полный газ! Дал! Кажется! Полный газ! Нет! А? Я дал газ, дал! Какая скорость?
After the investigation, it was concluded that the cause of the crash was due to the presence of a civilian at the controls. He then disconnected the autopilot lateral control and no warning sounds were heard. The pilots were also not trained for jet upset recovery at high altitude. The first officer was also not seated properly when he was in control. During the cruise phase, he actually put his seat back to relax. After the accident, several recommendations were introduced. Flight deck security was enhanced. More training was given to pilots. An audible warning system was also introduced in order for the pilots to be aware of a change in flight systems. Do subscribe to this channel for more true stories in aviation. If you want to see more videos like this, check out our other videos on the playlist. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate you and do comment below on what do you think.